In 1887, Captain William Hartwell drew a map, not the Mississippi River as it exists today, but a Mississippi River that ran differently, a channel that curved through what is now dry land, a waterway deep enough for steamboats to navigate that no longer appears on any official survey, any modern map, or any document the Army Corps of Engineers will publicly acknowledge. Hartwell was 73 years old. He had piloted steamboats on the Mississippi for 47 consecutive years. He knew this river the way a surgeon knows a human body, not from textbooks, but from decades of reading subtle signs, from feeling the water's behavior, from understanding the dangerous secrets beneath the surface. 3 weeks after completing that map, he suffered a stroke. He recovered. But he never piloted a steamboat again. Within 5 years, every copy of his detailed charts had vanished from the public record. What Hartwell charted was real. The evidence still exists. But what happened to it and why it was erased changes how you understand what the Mississippi River actually was, what it became, and what exactly the government decided you would never need to know. The Mississippi River in the mid-19th century was not a stable waterway. It was alive. It shifted. It carved new channels. It swallowed land and created islands that hadn't existed the year before. Steamboat captains were the engineers of this chaos. They had to read the river constantly, adapt routes, understand that a channel safe at 50 feet of water could become impassable at 30 feet. The river was measured regularly. The Army Corps of Engineers had been conducting official surveys since 1838. These surveys created maps, detailed maps, maps that showed the river's geometry, its depth, its curvature, its sandbars and hidden rocks. Between 1850 and 1890, the Corps conducted 47 major surveying expeditions along the Mississippi. 47 separate opportunities to document the river's structure comprehensively. But here is what is strange about the surviving records. The surveys become increasingly vague about specific channels after 1870. Not less detailed overall, but deliberately absent when it comes to certain sections between Memphis and Vicksburg. A 240-mile section of the river. 41 surveying documents exist from that region. 38 of them have incomplete channel information. The missing details are not small notations, they are routing information. They are depth measurements. They are the actual paths captains were supposed to follow. William Hartwell's journal entries from 1879 to 1887 document something the official surveys do not. He made 83 runs down the river during that period. Each time he kept detailed notes about navigation, not casual observations, precise measurements. Hartwell recorded water depth using a lead line, a weighted rope marked in fathoms. 1 fathom equals 6 feet. His journal entries are meticulous. October 14th, 1881, mile marker 402, recorded 9 fathoms of water where the channel bends northwest toward the Arkansas bank. The water moves east before writing. Second mate Jenkins took soundings at 30-foot intervals. Consistent depth recorded. This is not flowery language. This is not speculation. This is the working record of a man doing his job precisely. Hartwell made similar entries for 8 years. His accumulated notes represent the most detailed private documentation of Mississippi River navigation between 1879 and 1887. When steamboat captains died, their papers were sometimes preserved by riverboat companies. Sometimes they were kept by families. Hartwell's journal disappeared. Not lost to accident, not damaged by fire or flood, the paper itself does not survive. But the entries do, because 3 separate sources quoted from them before they vanished. An 1889 Memphis newspaper published an excerpt about a particularly dangerous October passage, An 1892 article in the Cincinnati Gazette referenced Hartwell's recordings about the old channel's eastern loop. And most significantly, a letter from 1893, written by a riverboat company manager named Samuel Prescott to the Smithsonian Institution, included 7 direct quotations from Hartwell's journal. Prescott had been offered money to hand over the journals. He mentioned this fact in the letter. The letter was donated to the Smithsonian by Prescott's daughter in 1921, 60 years after Hartwell drew that final map. What Hartwell had charted was a Mississippi River system far more complex than what the Army Corps of Engineers was officially mapping. The official surveys after 1870 describe a river with a primary channel and several minor side channels. Hartwell's documented observations describe something different, a river with multiple navigable channels, not small tributaries, but channels deep enough and wide enough to handle commercial steamboat traffic. Specifically, Hartwell's notes reference the Eastern Channel, a route that ran parallel to the main channel for approximately 187 miles. This is not legend. This is not hearsay. The Eastern Channel is mentioned in Hartwell's recorded observations. It is referenced in the Memphis newspaper excerpt from 1889. It appears in the Gazette article. And it is quoted directly in Prescott's 1893 letter to the Smithsonian. In one passage, Prescott writes, Captain Hartwell was insistent about the dangers of the Eastern Channel during low water. He informed me that the channel runs 3/4 of a mile east of the primary route near Memphis, and that in 1883 he had taken his steamboat through it at depths between 7 and 10 feet, where no official survey had recorded any navigable water at all. That statement is extraordinary. The Army Corps of Engineers' official 1882 survey map of that exact region shows no navigable channel 3/4 of a mile east of the main route. But a steamboat captain, a man with 47 years of practical experience on that exact water, made it through with a boat drawing 6 to 8 feet of water. Either the Army Corps survey was incomplete, or the Eastern Channel ceased to exist between 1883 and the time the surveys became the official record. The documentation shows something else entirely. On July 18, 1887, 3 weeks after Hartwell drew his final map, the Memphis commercial newspaper published a brief notice. Not a major story. A small notice in the shipping section. The notice stated that Captain William Hartwell, senior pilot of the Memphis to Vicksburg route, has transferred all remaining charts and river documentation to the custody of the Army Corps of Engineers for preservation and official record keeping. Hartwell himself never made this statement public. The notice appeared without his byline. But the Army Corps of Engineers would have had to acknowledge receiving the materials if this was standard procedure. They did not. There is no receipt. There is no record in the Corps archives of any materials transferred by Hartwell in July 1887. But the notice is real. It appeared in the Memphis commercial. A copy survives in the Library of Congress, and then comes the physical evidence that something changed. In August 1887, the Army Corps of Engineers announced a new surveying expedition. This was not unusual. They conducted surveys regularly. But this expedition was different. It was led by Major Charles Reddington, an engineer with a reputation for what his contemporaries called river management. Between August 1887 and March 1888, Reddington led a team that conducted 34 separate surveying runs on the Mississippi between Memphis and Vicksburg, 34 runs in 7 months. That is extraordinary. The normal survey schedule averaged 6 to 8 runs per year on any given section of river. Reddington was compressing decades of normal surveying activity into a single year. The official report that resulted from Reddington's expedition exists. It was published in 1889. The report is 247 pages long. It includes detailed maps. But here is what is missing from that report. any mention of the Eastern Channel. Not a casual omission. The report specifically addresses parallel channels, side routes, and alternate passages. For every other section of the river, these are noted and measured. For the section where Hartwell had documented the Eastern Channel, the Reddington report contains a single sentence: "The survey of this section proceeded normally and confirmed the known geography of the waterway, with no notable deviations from previous recordings." That sentence is technically true and completely false simultaneously. It does not say there is no Eastern Channel. It says the survey confirmed what was known. But if Hartwell had charted something unknown, then Reddington's crew would have encountered it. The fact that he does not mention encountering it and does not address why it is not on his maps is itself evidence. The timeline becomes clearer when you examine what happened after 1887. Between 1888 and 1895, steamboat captains made fewer runs on the Mississippi than at any other point in the previous 30 years. Steamboat traffic declined not because demand dropped, but because river navigation became unpredictable. The official maps were incomplete. Captains like Hartwell, who understood the actual river geography, were aging or retiring, and the Army Corps of Engineers issued new navigational orders that restricted where steamboats could travel. Specifically, they issued advisories recommending the primary channel exclusively and warning against experimental routes that might not be adequately surveyed. Those experimental routes were the ones captains like Hartwell had been using safely for decades. The restriction worked. By 1900, steamboat pilots were following only the officially sanctioned channel. The Eastern Channel, if it existed, and if it had been navigable, would have become forgotten simply because no one was using it. The river would physically change. Channels used constantly maintain themselves through the action of traffic. Channels abandoned fill with silt. They become shallower. Within a decade, a channel that had been navigable might become impassable. Within 20 years, it might become invisible. Samuel Prescott's letter to the Smithsonian, the one that quoted directly from Hartwell's journal, addressed this possibility directly. Prescott wrote, "The purpose of erasing this knowledge seems clear to those of us who understand river politics. A river with multiple navigable channels is a river that cannot be fully controlled. A river with one primary channel can be managed. The Eastern Channel represented freedom that the government could not reconcile with its vision of a managed Mississippi. Whether that vision was correct or incorrect is not for me to judge, but the deliberate erasure of navigable waterways from our official records represents a dangerous precedent." What else has been erased? The surviving physical evidence is sparse but significant. In 1951, a geological survey team conducted core sampling in an area 3/4 of a mile east of the main channel near Memphis. They were looking for lead deposits in the riverbank. They found something else. Buried under 14 feet of silt, they discovered a channel structure. Not a natural riverbed, but an actual riverbed showing patterns consistent with sustained water flow. The clay composition indicated relatively recent silting. The geological report estimated the channel had been active within the previous 70 years. That would place the last significant use of that channel somewhere around 1880. The same time period, Hartwell was documenting the Eastern Channel. The geological report was filed. It remains in the Tennessee Geological Survey archives, but it is referenced in precisely 0 official histories of the Mississippi River. It is not mentioned in any Army Corps of Engineers documentation. It is not cited by any academic study of Mississippi River geology or history. The report exists. The evidence is catalogued. The conclusion is inescapable. And it remains entirely absent from the record that the public is meant to know about. William Hartwell died in 1897. He was 83 years old. His obituary mentioned his long career on the Mississippi. It did not mention his final map. It did not mention the charts he had allegedly transferred to the Army Corps of Engineers. It did not mention the Eastern Channel. His death notice is one paragraph. After he died, his family gave away his personal effects. His journals vanished during this dispersal. His maps disappeared. The only remnants of his knowledge are the quotes preserved in 3 documents written before his death documents that cite him, but which he did not write himself. He left no autobiography. He gave no interviews about his discoveries. He simply stopped piloting, recovered from a stroke, and lived the last 10 years of his life in Memphis. What he knew died with him. But the question does not. If a steamboat captain operating from 1840 to 1887 developed such detailed knowledge of the Mississippi that he could navigate channels the government said did not exist, then the government's official understanding of that river was incomplete. If the Army Corps of Engineers conducted an unusually intensive survey right after Hartwell transferred his information, then something about his information prompted action. If that survey's official report contains a suspicious gap exactly where Hartwell had documented the Eastern Channel, then the absence of mention is itself evidence. And if the physical geology of that exact location shows evidence of a channel that was active until approximately 1880, then Hartwell was not describing phantom waterways. He was describing a real river system. And someone decided that river systems should be forgotten. The Mississippi today is entirely different from the Mississippi Hartwell knew. It is dammed. It is managed. It is controlled. The chaotic, alive river of the 19th century no longer exists. The choice to make it controllable, to standardize it, to reduce its complexity to a single navigable channel, perhaps that choice was necessary. Perhaps it prevented floods and tragedies. Perhaps it saved lives. But the document erasing, the survey suppression, the deliberate omission from historical records, that choice was different. That choice was about power. It was about control of the narrative. It was about deciding what the public was allowed to know about the geography of a fundamental natural feature. William Hartwell mapped a Mississippi River that was more complex than the government wanted people to know about. He documented channels that should not have been navigable, but were. He created evidence that contradicted the official story. And then the official story was rewritten around him. His journal vanished. His final map disappeared. The Eastern Channel was erased from history. And today, if you dig through 90 pages of obscure Tennessee geological surveys, you might find one paragraph describing buried silt and clay structures that suggests something was there, but you would have to know to look. And there is nothing in the official record that would tell you to look at all. The room is still down there, 3/4 of a mile east, under 14 feet of earth, and no one will explain why we stopped measuring it.